Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be showing you how to change out an alternator on a Porsche 911. The alternator is sitting right over here. It's not really too hard to change out. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing you want to do is come up to the luggage compartment up front and disconnect the ground cable. The next thing is coming back here and removing the air box. You have a mounting bolt right here, and then you'll take off your band clamps, your mass airflow sensor, pull up your oil filler neck, and remove this air box out of here. Now some people don't like taking that hose off, they rather just disconnect it over here, but I just think it's a little bit easier to get the box out whenever you disconnect it from the throttle body, because then it comes completely loose. On the mass airflow sensor, you just come over here and press on the plug underneath, squeeze it and pull the connector off. Then you'll be able to completely remove the air box out of the car. Just be careful, wiggle it back and forth a little bit so it doesn't hang on anything, and then bring it right out and set it to the side. Now you can see that you have access to the alternator right here. 15/16 socket, and you'll place it onto that pulley right there just above the crank pulley, and you will push it downward. Whenever you push it downward, then it will release the tension on the belt, just like that. And then you'll be able to remove the belt off from one of the other pulleys somewhere. And get it completely loose. So the next thing you need to do is get you an E14 socket, looks like this right here, to be able to remove the bolt off from the pulley right there. Now this bolt goes all the way through and mounts the alternator. You can see it pulling out completely right there. And you'll see there's the E14, and just set that off to the side. Then you'll come right down here to the bottom one, take the E14 off on the bottom side. Okay, so once you've gotten both those bolts out, normally what I do is, whenever I take this out, I take the pulley off, and then I'll stick it back in there. I know there's a lot of different videos telling you different things to do, but I'll screw that back in there like that, and then I'm going to hit it with an air hammer. Now, if you don't have an air hammer, a 5-pound sledgehammer will work. You're going to need to look back on the back side of the alternator and see if that bushing will push through. Now, you don't want to move the alternator too much, especially on the top side, because you have vacuum lines. I normally go ahead and disconnect vacuum lines, because if you don't, you'll end up breaking them whenever the top of the alternator hits up underneath the intake manifold. So go ahead and just disconnect your vacuum lines and set that off to the side. It's a whole lot easier just to disconnect it, and then whenever the alternator's out, then you can go ahead and reconnect everything. But I'll go ahead and hit that with an air hammer. Now sometimes I get lucky and don't have to do this. The point is just to drive the bushing out in the back to where you can wiggle that alternator. Sometimes they're loose enough and they're not frozen to where I can take a pry bar, wiggle the alternator a little bit and get it out. If that's not the case, I'll sit here and hit it with an air hammer. And then also other models, I've seen them with just regular socket heads instead of this inverted torque. So I'll look back in the back and see if it's coming out. you can't really see it, but back on the back side, there's a bushing that I'm driving outward to make the alternator loose to where it moves. See how it's moving freely now? So once that's moving freely, and take the bolt back out. So just wiggle it and rotate it clockwise whenever you're looking at it, and you'll see it rotate enough around to lift up this side and get it to clear this bracket down here. And then you're able to bring it forward. Now remember earlier I told you to disconnect the battery, because you're going to have to come right back here and take this battery cable off that's on the back side, but you can see how I slid it forward right there. And then there's this other little switch right here, this little wire. I know it's kind of hard to see down in there, but this wire right here is a spring push clip. So you gotta squeeze it, or squeeze clip. So you gotta squeeze it and then kind of wiggle it out and bring it out. You can see right here, it's got a squeeze connection on it. So you get that loose, and then you'll take your other bolt loose. I'm using a 1/2-inch socket to take the bolt off the back of the alternator. Just smashed my finger whenever it came up all of a sudden, smashed it up here. So take that nut off, slide the battery cable off, and go ahead and lift the alternator up and out of the car. This bushing right here is the one that you need to drive back a little bit. Now I normally don't have to get them back that far, but I do get it to drive back just a little bit in order to wiggle the alternator to give me more room to get it out. So before you put the new alternator in, you want to compare it with the old one, make sure everything looks right on it. So we'll go ahead and get it back into the position here and reconnect the battery cable and the other wiring. Okay, now that the wiring's back on, we'll go ahead and slide it back into place. You might need to hold the vacuum lines just to the side just a little bit. Just push them off. Don't put too much pressure on them, or else you might end up cracking them. To get the alternator to kind of spin in counterclockwise to lift the inside inward. And then you can go ahead and take your bolt with your pulley, slide the pulley back onto the bolt, slide it in to the first mounting hole. Just kind of wiggle the alternator a little bit to get the back up enough to get the bolt into the hole. You can normally start spinning it in by hand, and then take your other bolt down here, lift the alternator slightly. You'll be able to start the bottom nut, or the bottom bolt also. And you want to check and make sure that your lines aren't broke up top, your vacuum lines. So now you can take your E14 socket again and go ahead and start tightening the bolts up. So whenever you're tightening up this bolt right here, it'll actually pull the bushing inward on the mount on the alternator back into the proper place. If you remember earlier, whenever I showed you whenever both alternators were sitting next to each other, that the new bushing was on the back side. That makes it easy to install, but whenever you put the bolt back in, it will draw that bushing inward to contact the mount on the engine side whenever you're tightening it up. So once you get your bolts tight, you've got the alternator on there now, and you will come over here and go ahead and install the belt back on. You didn't really have to remove it completely out of its place, so it's not too hard to get it back on. You use the same socket that you used earlier, which is a 15/16. Push it downward. Slide the belt on. Make sure you got it flushed everywhere. Check the belt on the bottom side to make sure that it's on the pulley properly. And now you're ready to reinstall your air box. So putting in the air box is a complete reverse process of removing it. Just kind of slide it into position here. Get the pipe on your throttle body. Make sure that your wire for your mass airflow isn't squished underneath the box. It's pretty easy to slide it into place. And then put the oil filler nick back there. Slide in your vacuum lines and go ahead and tighten up your band clamps. Now I normally like to hook up most of the stuff on the intake box. I keep an eye on the hole right here for the mounting bolt to make sure it stays aligned, but I kind of like to wiggle it around, get everything in place where it's supposed to go before I put my bolt in, and that way I don't have an issue aligning anything. So then put your bolt in. That'll be pretty much the last thing that you're going to do. Alright, there we go. Looks like we've completed the install on the alternator. But once you've looked over everything to make sure that's all back together and that you didn't forget to reconnect something, then it's time to go ahead and reconnect your battery, start it up, and check to make sure everything's working properly. Now keep in mind that your vehicle might be slightly different than this one, so the process might not be completely the same. But other than that, thanks for watching. I hope that helped someone out today. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button, like it, share it, leave your comments below, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching again.